The Kingdom Choir indeed gave a very interesting, lovely rendition of Stand By Me. Allow me to introduce our panelists this morning to talk us through a raft of issues this morning. And of course, we know one that will be training our focus, and we have been training our focus, and all medias have been fixated on is corruption. And already we can see, yes, there is done action from the president regarding also the procurement officers being vetted, and some from the ministries, agencies, and parastatals as well. But one of the tripping wires that we always see is that once these people are arraigned in court, they are always seeking for bails. So how does that also encumber the process of fighting corruption in the country? With those monies that they've stolen, they use them actually to bail themselves out. And we can see these cases also taking long, protracted time in courts. And they taper off with years, we forget about them, and of course they go scot-free with the monies. So how do we address this? And of course we know a bail is a constitutional right. So how do we navigate the choppy waters? Allow me to introduce to you this morning, we have with us Senator Aaron Cheriot, who is a senator of Kericho. Also we do have with us Senator Matula Kilonzo Jr., who is a senator from Makueni. We have with us as well Senator Kimani Matangi, who is a senator from Kiambu. Jacob Medio is with us as well, who is the former minority leader of the National Assembly. Also we have with us Dr. Otende Amolo, who is a member of parliament from Rarieda. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
And we can see the headlines today, looking at the Daily Nation, is all about graft and another case of, so if you may just pick up the Daily Nation, you can see this is what is happening with oil in the country. It is a revelation. Kenya's biggest theft. The numbers are broken down for you. On top it says detectives have quizzed top managers, but how much higher are they willing to go? This is from the Kenya Pipeline Corporation. Tenders have always been drawn for kickbacks at Kenya Pipeline, and the temerity has grown proportionally with the budget. In just 3 years, your 95 billion shillings could have been lost here. And the numbers are broken for you. And of course, you can see there, enough is enough. And also, the People Daily is carrying this particular story for you. And this is actually tying in tandem with our discussion this morning, how injunctions stole war and graft. At least 15 corruption-related cases yet to go full trial, with suspects granted injunctions to allow constitutional interpretations. You have the story continuing on page 4 of the People Daily this morning. Let's just begin with Senator Aaron Cheriot on this particular story. It's good to see you. And I can see also members from the Rift Valley, they are seeking to know what is happening, or the faces behind the NCPB as well.
Yeah. Well,
take it away.
Good morning, Debarl. It's very interesting. I don't know why Jacoyo laughed when you said you want to begin with me. But I want to tell Jacoyo and Mutula, who laughed loudest, that you chose to begin with the saint. As you go downwards.
You're the saint.
As you go downwards. Well, pretty much interesting times that you're living in as a country. And this is, I think, what we've been calling for as a country for a long time, that we would get to a point where I think what we are beginning to have is a national discussion where we are asking very valid questions as a country, with this kind of information coming out to the public, where colossal amounts of money, figures that will make you get shocked. You know, when, first of all, at my age, when you speak about, for example, this 95 billion shillings, I cannot imagine how it looked like. Maybe richer folks on this panel, maybe like Otiende or Jacoyo, may know how such huge money looks like, but my mind cannot comprehend. Perhaps even how to write it down, I do not know. And when you're told that this is taxpayers' money that has been lost through dubious means, so here we are. The point is, how high are we willing to go? Are we able to reveal and say, give us a trail of exactly how each and every person in the procurement stage, up to the leadership of the institution, and even up to the highest faces, are willing to go in terms of this war? It's a very huge challenge, of course, when you want to balance it alongside the discussion that you placed before us, is where the institution of our courts come in. And I want to say this, Debarl. Sometimes I have come to the realization that despite what may be extremely the popular or the vogue things to say, it is good to leave our judicial system to be as independent as can be. The reason I want to say this is that Sometimes I look at the names and the people that you are told 30 people have been caught in a swoop. What is the possibility that out of these 30, there may be 1 or 2 who are not as guilty as the rest of the 28? And you know that in the philosophy of law and jurisprudence, one of the things they posit is that you'd rather have 9 guilty people walk out free than have a single innocent man in jail. Therefore, the point that I make to our judiciary is the challenge is now on your court. We've placed, the evidence has been placed on your table. Adjudicate for us, let us see. If someone is guilty, charge them. If someone is innocent, free them.
Thank you.
Let them not bulge to the pressure and the whims. The rest of us, the politicians, you can make noise. The media can highlight the stories. But for the judiciary, keep your cool and give us genuine results.
All right, keeping it cool. Of course, also we heard from the Chief Justice himself during the National Prayer Breakfast meeting. Let's hear what he said.
Your Excellency the President, we know you have declared war against corruption. I have said this in the past. I said this even in the US last week. The judiciary, you can count on the judiciary. We are together. On fighting corruption.
All right, so we might be together, but of course also the stricture of the law sometimes can be an encumbrance in fighting corruption when we're talking about bails. And we're all keeping our eyes peeled and keeping out our ears to see how the development within the courts as far as the NYS scandal is concerned. Will they also be seeking for bail, which is their constitutional right? So, but how will that also affect the entire cases? Let's hear from Dr. Omolo.
Well, good morning, Kenyans. Good morning, Debarl and my colleagues. When the Senator says that we are starting from the saint downward, I don't know what that makes us. Because to my understanding, the citadel of corruption has been this house called government. And as we all know, especially the executive, for the rest of us, we have been picking and peering from outside. At the way the loot is being shared inside there.
And not collecting crumbs.
It is only in recent days that that door has been opened. And we are likely to walk in. And even as we walk in, we still will not have a seat at the table. So the Senator, more than anyone else, must be the one to tell us about this. This 95 billion did not just happen in the last 1 week.
Yes.
It has happened in the last nearly 5 to 7 years. So I think he's in a better position than he purports to be. Secondly, though, I agree with him entirely. While I laud the newfound political goodwill to fight corruption, which has therefore given new impetus on the need to focus on corruption issues, it is a knee-jerk reaction. And the danger with knee-jerk reactions is that they bring excitement and sometimes they might fail. I think while we should take advantage of the political impetus to make the focus on the war on corruption more systemic and systematic. Systemic in terms of looking at the entire edifice, in terms of institutions, in terms of the law, in terms of history, and in terms of even things like the procedures for vetting and removal from office. I think, and I agree with Senator on this, that the one danger we should not fall into is expect that the judiciary should join the lynch mobs when it comes to issues of the fight of corruption. That would be very dangerous. The judiciary must remain dispassionate and it must remain true to the law. And where the judiciary itself is seen and can be seen, and there are mechanisms for doing that, that it is failing either on account of individual corruption within the judiciary or some systemic problem, then we must address that. But let us not fall into the danger of saying, now the president has said we are cracking on corruption, let the judiciary convict everyone. That is a very dangerous situation to be. And I would explain later why I think so.
All right, let's hear from Mutula Kilonzo.
Thank you, Debarl.
And good to see you. It's been a while.
Yes, I've been away. I'm back. First and foremost, the news about corruption in our headlines every day is extremely depressing. I was in a forum in Germany last week, and people who are assisting the country are extremely jittery about assisting the country, and particularly devolution. And the comment made by the ambassador who is representing sub-African countries is that when headlines appear this way, they cannot distinguish whether this is happening at national level or at county level. But more importantly, I'm happy that the sentiments that we have made in the past about the fight against corruption, that there was no goodwill, the statements issued by the president 2 years ago through Alake Wako, EACC at the National Assembly, was absolute political hogwash, because then these actions should have been taken. Maybe it would have saved the country a lot of money. If you look at the scandals, some of them are recent. The money that we are talking about vis-a-vis the development agenda of this country, vis-a-vis statements made by Rotich, we have no money, we are going to cut down on development at counties, we have a shortfall in revenue, and people are busy stealing. It's an indictment, absolutely, and this is an institutional issue. I'm happy to say that first and foremost, we have started with the food chain. The food chain is at the procurement level. That's number one. Number two, you go to the tender committees, because the government has made a bad habit of procuring everything at 3 times the cost. The irrigation Galala Kulana scheme, for example, where they are hiring land for 10 times the cost, or they buy roads for 10 times the cost, is something that we must address as a country. So as he's doing so, we hope that as they are catching the small fish, they are going to catch the big fish. But lastly, to say that I agree with my colleagues, and particularly Honorable Atiende Amolo, who of course is a guru in this and understands that I'm just praying that this idea of holding hundreds and hundreds of Kenyans into court is not an excuse of pulling wool over our eyes so that it appears as if something is being done and nothing is being done. Alternatively, that there's no investigation, it's just a way of cooling the temperatures down. These cases are going to drag along for a long, long time. In fact, the commitment that the CJ should have made, it's not even a commitment, it's already in the law. The Prevention of Corruption Act 2003 is very clear that cases of this nature should not be adjourned. And I participated in the first one under this law, is the one against the former governor of Central Bank, Andrew Mulay. I've said that before in this forum, that case ran for 3 weeks continuously without a single adjournment. That is the sort of commitment you want to see, that the cases will be done quickly, but there will be evidence. There is no reason to rush these cases. These cases must be done properly. It doesn't matter how long it takes, but we cannot allow you, Debarl, to start saying that the money that they have stolen is the one that is being used for bail. You can't mislead Kenyans like that. We can't allow you to make such statements.
I said perhaps. Right?
No. Such statements are wrong, because
You must remember he's a lawyer.
part of due process, the fair hearing, the conviction, the sentence, the acquittal, and bail are one and the same thing. They are in the same process. You cannot say then, like some of my colleagues, I'm shocked. People are saying return the death sentence, penalty, capital punishment for corruption. Has corruption become a disease to the extent that we must violate all international principles, that we go to capital punishment? Some of it is ridiculous, because we must get to a point, and I've traveled all over the world, where trust, accountability, transparency becomes the order of the day. It cannot be that every Kenyan is a thief until proved otherwise. That is not a true statement. And therefore, the president must crack the whip, and I hope at some point we're going to deal with the politicians. I was telling Senator Wamatangi here, on the pipeline, one of the things that precipitated this pipeline is a visit made by Senator Wamatangi in his Committee of Energy. And you must credit Senator Gideon Moi at the time, the Chairman Committee of Energy, because he smoked this scam on the pipeline in the last session. It's only that nobody was paying attention. But the Senate brought out this issue that there was a problem about the payment made to somebody called Zakem. This gentleman here in a nice suit and tie is now a commissioner at PSC, and Wamatangi here was seated in that committee. They can tell you the details. But there was no political goodwill. Otherwise, then this headline has come too late in the day when the money has already gone into the wrong pockets.
So what would we say? Because also we're looking at the way the judiciary also somewhat is torn in between as far as bails are concerned. Because yes, they will seek bail, and this is where now we have a demarcation line between your rights and the rule of law.
Yes.
And then these cases, they'll take a long protracted time. They'll taper off with time. We'll forget about them. We had the NYS one. We have the acquittal also of the principal secretary because of sloppy job done by the investigators.
Yes.
Yeah, so we can see maybe this also, the system will be gamed, and again, we'll forget all about these particular cases. We'll never recover this money.
The point is, and maybe at some point you're going to allow us to maybe discuss the detail of the process.
Yes.
Because now you begin to ask the question, what is the role of EACC in this? Mubea and his team and Alake and the chairperson. I don't know whether they pray every day, but their prayer has not resulted to anything. But we must begin interrogating the process. The new impetus that you see with the new DPP.
Yes.
Is there something that was lacking with Keriako Tobiko, who is not only just a good lawyer, he's a very polished lawyer, and my senior here can confirm, he's not just any other guy. Unlike, for example, the current DPP, who has not practiced in any of the courts for the time I have been there, and that is 18 years. So, what exactly is the problem? So that is what we need to check. But lastly, to say that it's not enough to suspend procurement officers. There must be a lifestyle audit. Why do these people live like kings? What is it? So we must begin interrogating their lifestyle audits. We must begin interrogating their wealth and the declarations so that we can get into you must get to the root of this matter. If you go to the parking lot somewhere at Comesa, you'll find that people who park the big cars there are procurement officers. So this is a big issue, but this is the beginning. And to quote Hamlet and Shakespeare, you know, there's a method. There is no method. There's a method in this madness. And I believe this madness will deal with it. So the president has begun somewhere. And that point where he's begun is a point where something needs to be done. And I think there's political goodwill. If this, I don't believe that it will not touch on very senior officials of Jubilee government. Half of them will be involved. We want to see them in handcuffs so that then we know that the president is serious.
Why the Jubilee government?
Yeah.
Why the Jubilee? Let's hear from Mamatangi.
on the Jubilee government. Debarl, thank you, and let me say good morning to our viewers. I want to concur, and that's what I said last Tuesday here, on where my good friend Senator Mutula has finished, on especially the role played by the officers below the top level, you know, procurement officers and so on. And you know, Debarl, one of the interesting things is that, as the president said, the government is introducing polygraphs, lie detectors, yes, to ensure that that these guys are going to undergo fresh vetting. But you know, Debarl and our viewers, one of the interesting things, if you can remember, when at the height of road accidents, largely caused by drunken driving, we introduced the breathalyzer, the alcohol. But there was a sustained campaign until at the end of the day today, I can assure you, what has happened is that the good work then that gadget was doing has been beaten to the ground. It's been defeated by court processes, by you know, coalescing and of course ganging up of club owners until now. You know, such a device, and that's why, you know, I'm a bit you know, sad on this one, because I'm not so sure that Kenyans will not lie to the lie detector.
See what actually Victor has captured today.
If you asked me,
look at that particular editorial cartoon what Victor has drawn. Yeah.
You know, I saw it, but that's what I'm saying. You know, I cannot guarantee you that Kenyans will not find a way of beating this, actually telling their lies through it and eventually succeeding, you know. But two things on this I want to say and loud clearly the action taken by the president, because this is the kind of determination we've been waiting to see. Yeah. At least, you know, when he started this fight in Parliament the last time and tabled that list, yes. What then should have happened from the officers below him then was this kind of action. If that had been done, this is what would have been maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And then we would have made the victory. But I want to say congratulations to him, because now once he realized that this is not being done at the level that he expected, then he's done it himself. And I believe the work that we should be doing ourselves now is to ensure that we keep it up and put it on. You know, most of the things that my friends here have said are true. Debarl, if you replay a few weeks ago, remember the excitement that was in Turkana when these peasants and hard-hit people were ululating and celebrating the discovery and now the commissioning that oil will start flowing. And you look at these headlines, and I want to say two things. First, you know, you can't imagine the magnitude and the latitude enjoyed by Kenya Pipeline in the control of the oil industry. Yes. It is extremely massive. And when this kind of plunder has been happening at Kenya Pipeline, it was happening when Kenya Pipeline is only in charge of oil belonging to other people. I mean, importers who import their own oil, so they have their eyes on the oil inside the pipeline. So it is very hard to steal a private owner's oil. But then what you'd want to ask yourself is, if this kind of plunder was happening when they were just managing other people's oil, what is likely to happen when now they're given oil belonging to the country, where it is being mined from under and nobody is keeping the number of liters or tons that are in the pipeline? And that's why I want to say this must go down to the last man, especially in this particular place. You know, I was a member of that committee last year that undertook this, and me and Senator Mutula, we toured his county in Makueni where there was an oil leak in the pipeline. And we tried to pursue one compensation for the victims there. As you remember me saying here, I had to, with my very limited resources, go and donate go and donate tanks to his people because Kenya Pipeline could not even go to the extent of compensating those people. And now, after that, we come to sit in the House and you find a contractor was coming to claim a variation, and Kenyans better listen to this, because I think we've come a long way. And we should ensure that all this kind of guys go in. Somebody comes and claims, I have done a contract, I have finished 97% of the contract, I have been paid 95% of the money, and I'm asking for a variation of a contract worth 42 billion, and I want 10 billion.
Thank you.
Now, extra. And that's what I'm saying. You know, unless we tackle this kind of corruption, and Senator Mutula Kilonzo, there is no doubt corruption is deeply embedded in our administrative structures, deeply, such that actually the words used when we were dealing with the judiciary, radical surgery, would be a joke. It would be a plaster. I mean, we would have to find new terms of the kind of surgery that would be required to get down deep into the kind of corruption that we are seeing. Finally, let me say that, you know, unless this war continues the way it is, and from top downwards to the last man, we see action that is going to be conclusive. And what Otiende Amolo was saying, that being the truth, that indeed the bailing an accused person or a suspect is the right constitutional, and as you correctly said, Debarl. But what has been making Kenyans very skeptical and cynical is not only because after that bail, even the results themselves, when you find the kind of sentences meted out on the billion-dollar looters against the chicken thieves. And you remember there was a very prominent case that you highlighted here of a woman who was jailed for stealing, I think, 250. 2,500.
Yes.
Jailed for 15 years. And a crook who had looted billions and billions and wanted internationally is told you can walk free.
We did take a
short break.
break.
That's the kind of thing you're talking about.
The conversation continues apace here with our panelists. We promise to circle back with Jacob Midio to also weigh in on judiciary and fighting corruption. Jacob, good morning.
Good morning, Debarl. Debarl, let me come to your rescue a bit from where we began.
problems.
It is interesting that the lawyers on this panel, and I've seen a couple of other lawyers in the papers, saying arrests are not just enough. You have to do this thing, let independent institutions work. And you know, I said here last week,
Yes.
that in this fight against corruption, 2 institutions must go home: EACC and PPOA. If you sent them home, you will have gone a long way, because you have people. PPOA is doing the work of commercial courts, and EACC is doing the work which is supposed to be done by police, as is correctly being done now. EACC, in fact, Wakili Mutula has just asked if Mwabea and Halake pray every day. Their chairman is a former bishop. So they must find time to pray, except I don't think they mean what they're asking for. Those ones, coupled with the behavior of Jubilee in the last 5 years, and an ineffective EACC, a lacuna was created. And civil servants and politicians thought theft is the new way of life in Kenya. In fact, because people thought the president was lazy, people went after public wealth, because nobody was there to do what President Uhuru Kenyatta is doing today. Had he started that 5 years ago, we would have proceeded from where Kibaki Raila left, and Kenya would be a much better place. But not all is lost. I want to agree that bail is a constitutional right, and it's the right way to go, because there are some people who usually are arrested just colossally. They were in the process. I have seen somebody being charged in one of the CIA cases that he was just there during that process. But that is not what Debarl is talking about. Debarl is saying the stolen money finds its way in this judicial process. You know, people keep saying police do shoddy job. Now I see they're saying you can't just arrest. If you know people have stolen 95 billion, which job do you need? Take these people through the legal process and don't victimize them. Yes. In fact, it appeared when, to me, when I saw that the trial of these people of NYS would begin yesterday, it appeared very bad, because there are other thieves who have been charged in these courts. So the courts cannot escape. How did they get the calendar before the courts? The logic of it. There are so many people who have wantonly stolen, and they were charged 10 years ago. Yes. How come you do not begin? Why do you think it is these people who need justice more than the old thieves or suspected thieves? I think something is amiss. Yes. And the judiciary, it seems, the same independence that we pray for it to have, the judiciary seems to want to do what the executive is saying. And I don't think, there's backlog of cases. They have not been heard. So you can't arrest somebody last Tuesday and begin the trial on Monday, the following Monday. Something is not right. We would like to see justice, and this is where politicians, the reason is the other people who had been charged, the Kimunyas, the Murungarus of the world, yes, they are politicians. That's why you don't begin with their files. Kenyans are paying for political blood. Remember the Ghana case? Yes. I want to disagree with my friend Wamatangi. Some of these people will have to be colossal. Yeah. There's some people whose faces are in political corridors. You can't prove them they're stolen, but you can just tell he's a thief. That kind of person, you can't say this constitution. I'm saying in political corridors. That is a fact. I will tell you when we are taking tea, because I'm with the lawyers. I have to protect myself. But
By looking at him, you can determine this man is a thief.
Yeah, because you
That's a
see
good
them
thought.
in these political corridors. You see them in all. They are in SGR, they are in pipeline. There are all these things. So, but let me say, let me teach the president something. What Kibaki did in 2 or 3 January, Kenyans were the most happy people, the most hopeful, enthusiastic. We are not now. You know the reason we are not? And I want to teach the DCI and the man I like, Kameru, and the DPP. You cannot be fighting inside houses however amount, because theft is theft, that you are looking for NYS people. And policemen are taking 50 shillings when public is watching. Yeah. You must deal with what is visible. Remember in 2 or 3, a woman arrested a police officer on Thika Road. As a private citizen. That is where I want us to get. You cannot have a scenario. The other day I was driving home from Kisumu. You see a policeman, they're standing there and he's taking money in front of me, and a young boy who looks like 12 is on a border carrying another one who is like 8 years old. No helmet, and he's just here, and the policeman is laughing. So what is it? Corruption is corruption. Whether you are stealing, the thought of it in itself is corruption. So what do we want to see in this country? As I finish, Debarl, deal with corruption in totality. Deal with corruption in employment of police. Deal with corruption in recruitment in civil service. Those are low-hanging fruits. But how I wish the president's men will tell him that Midiu said from today, just make an announcement. If we get you, in fact, there's something which has been going around about Kagame, that a policeman tried to get a bribe. And Kagame personally wrote to him, he said, I will not fire you, but if you do it again, I will kill you myself. That is what Kenya needs. We can't do this thing that the judiciary itself needs serious reform. So, you know, Maraga is very celebrated. But time for just talking, we are not in a classroom. I don't want to be a lawyer, so stop teaching me. Work. Straighten up the judiciary, especially after the experience we have seen with the political cases. You cannot tell me petitions that the Otiende team in NASA was so right and 339 Kenyans were so wrong. Something is not right, because the governors have taken over this country with money, and it is illicit.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's hear from Aaron Cheriota briefly, because we may go back to April as well, and I think also there was an article in the Daily Nation. This is where we're talking about Anglo leasing, we're talking about Golden Bag, and Anglo leasing files missing. This is what the court was told. If we may just pick up that so that they can see. Yeah, this is okay. Let me just try and make it up. Yeah, Anglo leasing files missing. Court told, and we can see here the Deputy Solicitor General Muthoni Kimani. That was in Nairobi Court on April the 3rd. And it says some of the original files for the Anglo leasing contracts cannot be traced. Deputy Solicitor General Muthoni told the Nairobi Court that 7 original documents detailing communications between the Attorney General, Treasury, Office of the President and Transport Ministry cannot be traced. And we failed to understand, in this epoch of time when all these files are supposed to be digitized, and the judiciary has been on the forefront telling us how they're going to digitize, you know, their files. How some files can be missing? Is this deliberate?
Actually, you've just spoken to something that I wanted to speak about in, the next time you gave me this choice. You know, Debarl, in America, there's a campaign that is so vogue at the moment. It's called the Me Too campaign, where women are speaking out about sexual harassment and that kind of thing in their office space.
We wonder if it catches in the country, how it will be.
I don't know. We do not want to go there. but certainly, the one place that I'd wish that we go and get on with this campaign is the Me Too experience with regards to corruption in the judiciary. If you were to tell Kenyans today to come out and speak of the times that they've bribed judicial officers for them even to get a land case adjudicated and get them the issue resolved. You know, people who've been charged with petty offenses and are told, do you know that the only way that you can get either a conviction for a particular person who's committed an offense, you need to set something aside for the judges. Therefore, the challenge that we're giving to Chief Justice Maraga today, and I want to agree with Jakoyo, this is one of the rare occasions that we get to agree with him, is that the time for lecture and good talk and looking good and grand about your position is over. The same way President Uhuru Kenyatta has breathed a new lease of life into this one, corruption in the executive wing of government, CJ Maraga needs to also breathe in a new lease of life into the fight against corruption in the judiciary. Because there's corruption in the judiciary, and we know that for sure. Do not trust what the lawyers will tell you, because they're interested parties, and I agree with Jakoyo. These two lawyers seated on my both sides, they are my good friends. I have no intention to say that they are corrupt. But one thing, when they speak, all lawyers tend to speak the same language. They want to protect the sanctity of judiciary, you know, let people be given bail and that kind of a language. They will not tell you the kind of things that Jakoyo and I are saying, that there is corruption in the judiciary, and we need to have the almost 2003 kind of scenario where we had what we dubbed then the radical reforms in the judiciary. But it achieved some form of good results, because for a good number of years, before the bad habits began to creep back, we had some sense of order and we were getting good convictions at that particular time. But the old habits, as they say, they die hard. And now we are back into that phase where people are bribing magistrates and that kind of a thing. So if we were to run this campaign, it will be interesting to see and hear who has been bribed and who has been given what amount of money. That is a challenge that we may need to take. Number two,
yes,
just let me say this. We will not be sincere, the five of us in this panel, if we discuss corruption and do not tell Kenyans that at some point we will need to have a discussion as Kenyans about how we need to demonetize politics and how that amount of money aids corruption. These huge amounts of money that you're seeing being lost in county governments, in national government, it has an interlink with politics and how we have made our politics so much about money. Our politics is no longer about values and setting out dreams and wanting to serve. It is no longer about service.
Thank you.
Any fool with huge amounts of money can be president of this country. Never mind the source of this money. Be it from whatever source. So long as you have money, you can get elected in this country. And that is the unfortunate thing we have to discuss. That's not a politician's problem. It's for the Kenyans also to begin questioning and say, how do we get such people into office?
As we're winding up on this, we'll come to you guys. But let me hear from Otende on this. We have cases where also the judges have said this particular, somebody has been denied bail. In what occasions do you deny someone bail?
Well, first, before I answer your direct question, I think Senator Cheriot, there are many people who have spoken the way you speak, that you should not listen to lawyers on some of these things. Usually, many of them have run to me, when now they are being haunted wrongly. Sometimes what happens, even with this fight on corruption, is that the real culprits of corruption are not targeted. Those who are targeted, actually, those who are fighting them. Now, that is when you then find good use for a lawyer. Now, secondly, yes, secondly, my friend Jacomidio brings a very interesting theory. He says, especially the politicians, you can always tell the corrupt ones when you look at them. Well, very close, very close. But yeah, close to that.
You'll be squatted.
It sounds, you know, like what we call Lombroso's theory of anthropological criminology. What Lombroso said was this, let me tell you, that you don't have to arrest people, go through trial so that you convict. You can always know a criminal when you see them.
Yes.
Usually you look at them,
yes,
they have a low forehead, they have a protrusion in the back, they have a lean face, you know, and almost, you know, he describes those physical features. So you just say, this one, you go. But what I agree on with him, though, and we've said this before, is that had President Kenyatta started this zeal much earlier, two things would have happened. One, we would have avoided a lot of scandals. Two, a lot of politicians, our colleagues, who were elected primarily because of how much money they have, based on how much they had stolen, would not have been elected. And so that I agree on completely. But I do not agree, though, that what, therefore, the solution is that you send home EACC. The problem is not the institution of EACC. The problem is the people we have put in there. So I would agree with that to the extent that you are focusing on the people, whether it's the commissioner's level or whether it's the level of the staff, not necessarily the institution. But now, coming back to your question, the issue of bail. It is my view, and I hate to spoil the party, that some of the knee-jerk reactions we are having now will not help us fight corruption. We can assess the problem, and I can tell you what the problem that we are facing is multifaceted. The first problem is inaction on investigative reports, and that's what the senators were talking about.
Yes.
If you look at the parliamentary reports, if you look at I was the ombudsman for 5 years. We did so many reports where we would identify corruption as clearly as it is. And you would even name the person and name the amount. No action was ever taken. We have the problem of lifestyle audit legislation. Right now, the president is saying, let's do a lifestyle audit. That is what this polygraph and all this is about. But the legislation on lifestyle audit, when it was brought, it has always been shot down. So right now, there's no legislative or constitutional basis for the president's directive. And therefore, when it is challenged in court and the courts use our constitution, it is likely to be struck down. The problem is that the constitution gives the cabinet, together with president, executive authority. And by executive order number 2, the president placed some direct responsibility on cabinet secretaries. So cabinet secretaries are able to make administrative directions which then are followed. But when it comes to responsibility, it only goes sometimes as high as the PSS. Why? The cabinet secretaries must also take responsibility for some of these actions. And so fighting corruption must be like justice. They say justice must only be done, but it must be seen to be done. What it means, therefore, is that when you are fighting corruption, and when some of those who we know, as Jacoy was saying, we know because it's the common parlance that they are the lords of corruption, then you must be prepared to go for them. You do not need a criminal trial to remove some of these people. We must distinguish between judicial culpability, which is where you must prove beyond reasonable doubt that someone has committed corruption. Then we must distinguish that against administrative responsibility. That is where, for example, if you are to do a lifestyle audit and you ask me, you have so much, 5 years ago you didn't have it, where did you get it? You don't have to prove that I stole it.
Yes.
But the fact that I can't explain it is reason enough to say, you must step aside administratively. And then lastly, there's the one of political cleansing. There are those people who everyone knows, whether it's the cabinet, whether it's the PS, whether it's what, that these ones are really practicing. You don't need any law. You don't need to take them to court. You can remove them. Now, I fear that what we are seeing now will end up being a charade. One, the question of bringing a polygraph, it is not founded in any law. Secondly, if you think about it, it is extremely expensive. The polygraph machines, the next scandal will be procuring those polygraphs to bring here. You will hear that we spent 5 billion. Then those to administer it. If you look anywhere, you'll see that administering a polygraph can cost up to about 500,000 sometimes, because they are specialists, if it is to be accurate. And look at that against the numbers. Then look at the NYS issue that is going on right now. We can celebrate that so many people have been taken to court. But what then you end up doing is that you take those who have the highest responsibility, put them together with those whose role was to cut a file from one office to the other, and therefore has minimal responsibility. And in doing so, you put the culprits and the witnesses together, and there'll be no one to testify. That is what has happened before even when NYS. In any system, you must always look at those with the highest criminal responsibility, usually between 5 and 10. Load the others as the witnesses, and then move to the next. Because when you do this, then they will all walk away. So I think that there's so much we need to do, but we need to step up and focus on it that we need to do it systematically.
Thank you.
And we do not need to compromise on the legal standards to do them. The law is there to assist us catch the culprits.
Thank you. Let's hear from Abdullah Kilonzo.
Yes, I want to agree to some extent, to a lot of extent with Otiende Amolo, and disagree vehemently with Jacob Midio on some points. The point is, just to agree to say what in a different way what Otiende Amolo was saying. Do you trust the ordinary police investigators to do the polygraph? They most likely do not even know, or have never seen, have never read about how a polygraph works. So before we administer it, we possibly have to do training, but there is no legal framework. The things that you are showing on caricature here, in terms of probative value, when the graph goes up or goes down, in terms of evidence before a court, what will you say was the lie? For example, what Matangi was saying, that Kenyans will lie to the polygraph. In terms of evidence, what do you procure and say, this is the evidence that this man was lying? So we have a gap there. I think the people who are advising the president are also getting adrenaline excitement about this. They're making him look like he's just making pronouncements for nothing and misadvising him. Because ideally, the direction should have come with either a framework, a legislative framework, which we must deal with in Parliament quickly, so that we can get this issue addressed. But I do not think that the lie detector is a way to do it. Even in the places where it has been practiced in the US, in most cases, in fact, the probative value of this thing does not work very well. Maybe some of the cases mentioned by Honorable Otiende Amolo work about lifestyle audits, bank accounts, etc., etc. This systematic issues. But lastly, the people who are responsible. We have not, in the NYS scandal, when the scandal comes up, you find the ministers are the ones who are the ones now to become the whistleblowers. They become the saints. They are the ones to issue statements. They are the ones to fire people. They never take responsibility. And therefore, the president must show the country that, in fact, in his cabinet, he's not going to sit with the Judases who are, in fact, fighting him from the back. Because if he's going to issue directives to some of these people who are sitting with him, they will most likely sabotage this process. The radical surgery of the judiciary was not a good example. It was just Kiraitu's way of punishing the judges who he thought were Kanu judges at the time. You remember the surgery failed because the surgeon took off and left the, the patients. What do we need to do? There's a proposal that Otiende Amolo made when he was the ombudsman about the electoral reform. He talked about a multi-agency approach. Means that this system cannot be driven the way it is. It's like this bus will get stuck somewhere. The agencies need to agree on something that you need to see the agencies working together in one place and agreeing this is the framework. This is the deliverables by the judiciary, EACC, DCI, etc., so that we get these cases done quickly. In fact, I think we can do a test case one by one. If you look at the lady, she called Ngirita.
All that glitters.
All that glitters.
All that glitters is Ngirita.
It's not gold.
When you think about the Ngirita example, that we went for the low-hanging fruit, the last person who received the money, as opposed to who, first of all, issued the order, from the PS, the person sitting in treasury, the banks, the people in the banks who caused the money to be paid. The NYS too is now littered with Ngirita, with her doing a lip gloss. The same way we did with the NY1, Kafura. The ladies are being punished. When you dig deep into this thing, you will find that the real culprits are watching TV like you and I and laughing. Those are the people who we need to deal with at Treasury, NYS, and other places. And possibly, like I've suggested before, disband some of these organizations that are not working. But eventually, we don't need 10 cases. We just need 2 cases done properly, 2 thoroughly, and it will serve a lesson. The people will go to exile. Forget about now they'll switch off their phones. They will go into exile, underground, completely. And that way we will deal with corruption in a much better scale. That is talking about the people who are in the structure. You deal with those ones. And then you go for the politicians, and then you go for the people who are sitting in big offices and big cars and deal with them. Freeze accounts, take over their assets, let the people be punished. You know, there was a very good, interesting example of a fellow who was prosecuted, who had 1-point-something billion shillings in Nairobi City County, and went and made an application that he needs money for daily use, 400 million. And you know,
It was granted.
and you know, the application was granted. From the proceeds of what appears to be corruption. He was given
the proceeds.
from the proceeds, yes.
That's the point you're
that is
making.
a boiler.
No,
Yeah,
I'm not talking,
exactly.
you were talking about bail.
That was the man's point.
The man was given 400 million for his daily upkeep. That is the same money that possibly was used to stall the case. So some of these issues, they are right, that we need to see the Chief Justice taking some little action by saying, I have constituted. And Jacob is right, because he's a petitioner. And his case has moved so quickly, he's in absolute shock. And you can see him. And he is right.
The cost
that
is
while,
nearly 8 million
while we have
shillings for a
legislation,
jobless person.
while we have legislation
You're a
for
rich man.
political election cases, and there's no case pending, and Otiende Amolo can confirm because he's a lawyer in some of them, none of them is pending in the High Court. They are all in the Court of Appeal, and 50% of them have been completed. If there was the Chief Justice was to make a pronouncement today that he has set up 7 anti-corruption courts, and he has devolved this to Makueni, Machakos, Kiambu, Tana River, Garissa, so that these cases can run simultaneously, quickly by special courts and special prosecutors, serious special prosecutors. Then we would know that the fight against corruption is making some good progress. Thank you, Debarl.
Right. You can also see an editorial cartoon here by Gado, and I think this is the light of what you're talking about, the detector, lying detector machines. Yeah, that the public has overwhelmingly over there endorsed the use of lie detectors machines. Let's start with you guys.
Yes.
And who are the guys?
There's Arab Singh.
Antoinette?
I don't know who the last one is.
We don't know. Are you sure?
He looks like a leader of some party. Yeah, some party Mutula belongs to.
And the king himself. The king should take a lie detector test himself.
And of course, Otiende Amolo's neighbor is not very far. That is Jacoyo's cousin.
Alongside your party leader.
Obatangi, let's hear from you.
Well, on the cartoon. Or on the why don't I take on the debate and then and finish with the cartoon? Because you know, I may end up proposing inclusion of a few other caricatures, at least to make a reasonable number, and make sure that the lie detector will be busy enough. You know, because my colleagues here have really and very well prosecuted the case for the here and now, and the immediate measures that absolutely we need to take as a country to fight corruption. Let me just also really introduce another aspect of it that I think is very, very important. That is, if we have to fight corruption and fight it in the long term, because maybe other than the man from the dynasty, that is Jacoyo Midiwo, and probably my very good friend and neighbor here, the Duke of Makueni. maybe the others I would ask, and probably you, Debarl, I don't know whether or when the last time you stood near Bama Market on Jogoo Road, or in Isli, near the former Kenya bus station where there's a lot of activity. And if you stood or walked there or lived there, even today, you will notice that there are police on the beat, armed with guns. But within that same mix of the crowd, you will find young men walking around and trying to see if the policeman looks the other way. They will snatch your watch and run or your wallet or a lady's bag. Actually here on Jogoo Road, if you're driving at this time and there is a bit of jam now, despite the police controlling, somebody will come and knock and break the glass of your car and literally steal from you when you're in, and there's nothing you can do. That happened to me a few weeks ago as I was driving up that way. I will tell you,
Problem of plenty.
and you would be asking yourself, you know, what is it that drives a young man, knowing that if the policeman turns and sees him, he will shoot him and kill him? What makes that young man take that risk? And I'll tell you, as we address this fight against corruption, unless as a country we determinedly say that we are going to do absolute overhaul of our socio-economic fabric and policy, something that we should have done a long time ago, and ask ourselves, what are we doing in addressing the question of the gap between the wealthy and the poor? Because, Debarl, I will state this because I know it is reality. Even if you promised a man death and denied him food, you will kill him when he's in the process of trying to get that food. And what am I saying? That, you know, for this corruption to be so deeply ingrained in the fabric, like I said, embedded in the fabric of our administrative structure, including in every system. If right now you recruit a young man from Mathare or from Kariobangi and give him a job in your farm or even in any government institution, maybe in the chief's office, and make him an administrator, and that boy is coming from a family that has got another 12 siblings and a mother and a father, where all of them go hungry, and give him a salary of 15 or 20 or 30,000, I would tell you, whatever you do, that boy will still have to find a way of stealing from you. Look at the condition, for example, and I agree with Jaco when he tried to tell us about, when he was telling us about the policeman who was being bribed on your way to Kisumu. But look at the conditions in which we are housing our policemen. And I know you've brought this issue here. Look at the amount of money you are paying those police officers right now. And these guys have families. You know, one day, I'll tell you, Debarl, I happened to go into Industrial Area Police Station, and I knew somebody. So I went and I knocked in after I was shown the door to where the policeman was living. And I can tell you what I saw with my eyes. I'll never forget in my life. Because when I was entering, there is a small curtain that divides the small mabati hut that they are living in. And I passed a lady, a police officer, with a stove that she was lighting and a child crying there, to go and past the curtain to talk to the police officer whom I wanted to talk to. And this is a lady who is married with a family and a child cooking for that child, and the people I'm talking to next is another family inside that hut, that small round mabati hut. And then in the evening, as you have said here, you will give that guy an AK-47 and tell him to hit the street and go and arrest criminals who are stealing from NYS. Now they're either drinking or whatever, and that guy is coming from that condition. And what I'm saying, unless, Debarl, we decide also in the long-term fight against corruption that we are going to ensure that we advocate and fight for a more equal society in this country, whereby all these masses, and I want to remind our viewers this morning, when the census for 2009 was done, Debarl, it said that more than 50% of our population then was between the ages of 25 and 35. What does that tell you? That in the next 4 decades, we are going to have, as a country, to sustain an aging population of more than 60%. And you're talking about that you'll be expecting to sustain that population against the same backdrop of a son or a daughter who wants a paltry amount to go and sustain their father and their mothers and their grandfathers. So, you know, the people who have succeeded in the long-term fight against corruption in this world, the countries that have made success, have also had to address the deep-rooted policy issues, administrative and political issues of their country.
Thank you.
And unless we do that as a country, this is going to be an occurrence. It's going to be an annual event, whereby you find that this time we will go and arrest a heap of people, take them to court, wait another time. But because the deep-rooted problems are still in existence,
Thank you.
It will be repeated all the time over. This one you have to do for the country.
Right, thank you.
You have to do for the people.
Right, let's just go back.